Uh, Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. With that, stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, we do need to go into non-public for purposes of, I guess that's legal or negotiations. Negotiations. If I could get a motion for that? Anyone?
I move that we go into non-public under RSA 9.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dick Dunning. All in favor?
Aye.
We'll now enter into a non-public session. We'll be right back. So I would, there could be a motion to seal the minutes from non-public. For a period of, I'll try that again.
I move we seal the minutes for non-public for 5 years.
Moved by Dick, second by Jerry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Thank you very much. With that, we are on to points of pride. Superintendent.
We've started our new hire professional development. New hires were in on Monday for an orientation. And we now begin the short but excellent journey of helping them become members of the Conval community. And those are our points of pride today.
Thank you, Superintendent. We have now reached the first period of public comment. Public comment provides members of the Conval community 2-minute period with which to address the board. Are there any members of the public this evening that would like to address the board? I see one member of the public who is not a Conval employee. Mr. Brown, would you like to say anything to the board this evening? Thank you for your attendance. It is always appreciated. With that, we are done our first period of public. I like to point out to the members of the public that show up to our meetings and that I actually know because I'm new here. So I'm not allowed to say that anymore. With that, that ends the first period of public comment. We are on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains 2 sets of minutes, nominations, and the co-curricular notifications. Are there any objections to either of the minutes, the personnel, or the co-curriculars? Rich.
Not an objection, just congratulations to Liam Baldwin, an outstanding Conval football player who's now come back as a coach. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. So noted. Go Cougars. Seeing no objection, the consent agenda is adopted. Superintendent's report and presentation of business feedback on administration goals.
So we did receive your feedback. There were some, which I'm sure you guys will talk about in a little while, but there were some consistencies when you provided feedback on the tasks. Those were sent to the appropriate administrative person, and now you guys will obviously have a larger discussion regarding goals in general. So unless there's something else for me, I guess that goes under old or new business.
Any comments for the superintendent at this point, or we'll do that later? All right. Great. Thank you. Reports. So this would be the policy committee just met. I think you're our only one. But you don't have to if you don't want to. Are you prepared to? Great. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
do we have to also go back and approve the previous minutes?
We don't, because those are now part of the consent agenda. Under New Hampshire statute, you don't actually have to approve your previous minutes. If the body chooses to, they can. School boards, you can, and any boards can use the concept of a consent agenda to lump all of those things together. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
The policy committee met this evening. We had a robust agenda, to say the least. We are working toward making sure that all of our policies are reviewed that are required by law on a regular cycle and basis. So we reviewed JICFA hazing, JICL, internet safety and responsible use for students, GBEF, acceptable use policy for staff, JRA, student records, privacy, family, student rights, DKA, payroll procedures, and we have a list of policies that will be coming forward in a very prescribed way so that we can continue on this work before the fall update comes out with required policies for us to look at. Several of these policies, such as JICFA hazing, will be coming before the board as soon as possible. There were some changes to that, and if anyone has any questions on any policies, please feel free to reach out to us as a committee or myself. Thank you.
There'll also be a couple coming to the board for rescission, since the new policy, JICD, will take care of some others that should now be rescinded. So we'll have that on the agenda shortly too. Great, thank you very much. Catherine, old business, legislative update. I don't have anything on that other than you probably all saw or should have seen the guidance issued by the New Hampshire Attorney General's office relative to the divisive concepts issue. Still nothing from DOE that I have seen or am aware of. I don't know if you have an update, if we're even expecting that, but the Attorney General's office did issue some statements on that.
In a meeting with the commissioner, he felt that covered any guidance that he would also send out.
Thank you. All right. With that, NESDEC.
So,
Rich.
The board member who made a nuisance of himself 8 years ago has no objection to us re-engaging with NESDEC now at that price, which is about a third of what we paid at the time.
Dr. Ullman.
Kibble, does NASDAQ also help in employee searches? I read I was used to the idea that they were going to do the demographic projections, but I wasn't aware that they help with.
so they can do
Searches.
several things as part of your affiliation fees. They can do demographic study. They can do a facilities use study, which may actually come at a discounted but not a fully free. They do a special education study. So there's several studies they do. You can also hire them to do searches for you for executive positions. Why are you thinking about that you're going to need an executive position soon? I'm just checking. No, but yes, they do searches. It was actually around the search and the demographics that there was some concerns.
Rich.
So that same board member continues with his objection to using NESDEQ for searches. It did not work out well. Like really, really didn't work out well.
That concern is duly noted. So with that, I would entertain a motion to instruct the superintendent to move forward with that.
Second.
Moved by Catherine, second by Dick. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? None. Okay, next up is budget transfers.
There are none for this meeting.
Thank you, Lori. Monthly events calendar. You have monthly events calendars in your packets. We are currently in August.
We are in August. If there are any changes to the monthly events calendar, if you could let us know. Anything for August. The 31st is the first day of school in case.
There'll be a board meeting on
The 12th.
Thursday, the 12th at 7 p.m. That will be a limited agenda meeting. Relative to that,
Maybe not.
what? Oh, hey, come on, no, come on, come on. It's not a, it won't have the full slate of regular stuff. That's at 7 p.m. Relative to that, I'll be, since that gives us a little bit extra time, there was a statement I was hoping to have available for you tonight, but did not. I will forward that to all of you tonight or tomorrow. Tries to explain to the public the roles between the COVID-19 monitoring team, the administration, and the school board, to try to lay that out to the public, to explain who does what and who has responsibilities for taking those actions and how that all plays out, to try to make sure we are clear with the public on how those roles and responsibilities work. Any other meetings for anyone that's not already on here? I notice there's no education or equity. Dr. Ullman.
It is likely that I'll ask the permission of the Education Committee members to meet for the first time in September because of the craziness of August for the administration.
That is your prerogative as chair.
Right, and if anything.
All right, thank you all. Next up is a special education teacher justification.
So in your packet, you did see that we are in need of an
I move we approve the position at PES for special ed.
Moved by Dick, second by Catherine. Rich.
So no objection to the position, but I'm going to ask this question for every one of these. Is the source of funding for this position federal, state, or local?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't
Is
quite
the
hear you.
source of funding for this position a federal grant, a state grant, or local funding?
This is local funding. This is, we always carry an extra teacher position in the budget, so it will come out of local funding for salaries.
Right. I'm just, would it be fair if I noted that we are responding to a federal mandate with local funding?
Yes,
Thank you.
that's fair. Thank you. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The position is approved. All right, next up is school board goals discussion. In your packet, you should have, it was also emailed to you. So this is, the purpose of this is to try to come up with 4 or 5 goals for the 2021.
3 or 4.
Do I get 4? What do I get? 5?
You
6?
get as many as you
I
want.
get as many as I want. Goals for the 2021-2022 school year. At the our workshop, the original discussion had been that anything relative to consolidation or reorganization would be dealt with in the strategic plan. It's unclear whether that is truly the intent of the board, though that's how I took it based on that last meeting. But nonetheless, I'll open the floor for anything contained in these documents that you all want to discuss, and or we need to try to narrow these down to a reasonable number of goals. So I guess we'll start with the ones that say class size. There's one relative to the board supporting an increase in class sizes in the small elementary schools so that as many classes as possible fall within the class size guidelines for each grade level. Questions, comments? Kevin?
I put that on there, and it's part. It would be part of an overall strategy to educate the communities, the small communities like Francistown, about the reality of the size of their school, which is, I'm sure that Ann and Kimberly and their staff work really, really hard to size the classes at these tiny schools as educationally soundly as possible. And I certainly support that to a degree, but I think it disguises the reality for these communities of what having their school serve such a small number of students would be. So, for example, just to paint with a very broad brush, Francistown with 45 students, just spitballing, is really only entitled to 2 teachers. So maybe 3. So if we moved in the direction of saying, give those towns schools the number of teachers they're entitled to, and then figure out how to distribute the students among those teachers, it would be a move in the direction of, oh, this is the reality of the size of our school and how it's funded. And I think that would be a step in the direction of some cold water that would be educational for those communities. So this might fall into the category of the consolidation things, right?
No, I mean, to me, this is a different, my reaction to this was that that was a different approach, right? Because that's not saying that, that's saying it's all, again, I'll let them come in after that if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, the only way you do that is it has to be the multi-age, ability, it would have to be, right, by that definition, and it would be a straight allocation of teachers against whatever that number is, and the students fall into those 3 buckets.
And the reason I listed it sort of as a board goal is, while I'm sure it might turn the stomach of Kimberly and Ann to do that kind of thing, I think there's a false reality out there on the part of the folks in the small towns with respect to what they're entitled to.
Fair. Liz?
So it sounds like you're trying to squeeze people a little bit. And I think with regard with what we were talking about in terms of earning people's trust and helping people understand why we would make a decision to possibly consolidate, that this possibly would not be the best way to go forward. Just in my experience in my small town, and having kids that are elementary school age that actually participate in our local education, and I feel that they get a great education at Temple. I'm aware of the other side of things as well, and I continue to be open to learning. However, I don't think it is an advisable move to take something away, to put pressure on people, to then have them react emotionally. And then you're taking away resources from the children who ultimately will suffer for it.
Well, if I thought children would really suffer for this, I wouldn't be in favor of it. I don't think children would suffer from this.
Kevin, under your proposal, there would be more multi-grade classes. For instance, in a very small elementary school, there might be a K through 2nd grade class and a 3rd through 4th or 5th grade class. So we'd end up with 2, let's hypothetically say that we'd end up with 2 teachers. Legally speaking, if we only have 2 teachers, how many professionals do we need to have in this tiny elementary school? Because I've been operating under the idea that somehow we have to have 7 paid professionals in an elementary school, no matter if it has 15 students.
So several years ago, 2-3 years ago, we brought forward kind of in order to provide the education that we are compulsory. Oh my goodness, we have to. Ugh, it's a long day. This is how many individuals we needed. Now, not all of those individuals have to necessarily be there all day. But the problem being is that when you start to move them around, you can't make their schedules combine perfectly. Not only that, but then you end up paying professionals for windshield time, which is not where you really don't want to be paying an OT their salary to sit and drive back between Temple and Dublin. So we did figure out, like, just bare minimum, this is what a building needs to be able to do what it needs to get done for children. Kevin, you're absolutely right. The idea of doing this, because for me, it's not obviously about, I understand kind of the what you're trying to show and illustrate. But I'm not, a couple of things come to mind. One is making sure the needs of the students are met. But two also is the amount of work that would need to be performed by those teachers who would then likely be teaching 3 or 4 different grades at a time could be significant, and it takes a certain amount of professional development and training in order for someone to teach effectively multi-age or multi-grade, whichever way you go. And oftentimes when we put that pressure on our staffing, what happens is we very quickly, those staff move out of those positions and into more traditional positions. So we are caught in a cycle of consistently doing the professional development. I don't, I kind of gave you my opinion at the same time. And again, I have been pretty forthright with the entire community, often receiving several not so friendly emails, feeling that it's in the students' best interest for us to consider some type of consolidation or some different organizational structure, and that it's in the best interest of the communities and the district itself. I'm just not, I would have a hard time just kind of going there. I do understand what you're trying to say.
Jim? Agreed. Perfect. Great. Thanks. Okay. Thank you, Jim. The next is strategic plan. So I presume we should have I'll do it this way. Thank you, Jim. So we should have a goal on strategic plan, right? What? Oh, right. Is that what we were saying? Sorry. Is that what you were saying? Okay. So Rich. Yeah.
Revisit it for a second, because I would have given it a thumbs up. And I don't want to squeeze anyone, and I take your point. But when I see towns with 40 students in their elementary school also trying desperately to prevent new housing from being built in an area and a time where housing is in desperate need of being created, that's some cognitive dissonance for me. And I absolutely accept that that is a decision and a choice that the communities get to make. But in the past, we've actually obscured this so that they're not recognizing that they're making a choice. And I think what Kevin is suggesting would have the benefit of making it clear that the choice people are actually making. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Jim?
Push, I'm on. That could very well be done as a communication plan as a part of a goal. I'm just trying to differentiate a goal from an action item for one of the committees.
Greg?
So I agree with your thought, Tim, in theory about the separation of the strategic plan, which I think all of us acknowledge that we need to have because it's well overdue. I personally think that part of the wording of our goal in relation to the strategic plan does need to include some wording about a path forward for looking at consolidation. I think if we don't put that in the goal for the strategic plan, I don't see that happening as part of the strategic plan. And I believe that after last meeting, most of us were at least favor of discussing this. And so I think that needs to be worded in one way or the other. Something to the effect that, how we want to word this, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to fall into the strategic plan. But certainly something to the effect that we will do the strategic plan in a timely fashion, and part of that plan is to, make a path forward for the consolidation of schools.
Sorry, so I think I may have either misheard Jim or misrepresented what I was saying. I was simply trying to go off of this, not to suggest that consolidation couldn't be its own goal, or a goal. I was just trying to go down this list to try to move us along and say, should there be a goal about strategic plan? Yes, no. Should there be a goal about budget? Yes, no. And then pick and work on our which one of these we want into those categories. So that's all. Sorry, I wasn't trying to say by any stretch that we were going to automatically put all of that under the strategic plan. That was not my intent. Kevin.
But I think Dr. Kriebel's suggestion is a really good one, is that we could have a strategic plan goal that included very specific language about a commitment to a path forward for consolidation, consideration of consolidation.
Okay, thanks. Works for me. Dr. Allman.
The second bullet point under reorganization, I think, is a pretty good start toward articulating a consolidation goal in the strategic plan. Can I move to down to the bottom where it says need for a bond in the next? Sorry, I'm moving along, Mr. Chair, to strategic plan.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was under the impression that the board intended to collect a bunch of capital projects and amalgamate them into a single bond proposal that we might try to put forward in March. Apparently, from these goals, we're going to delay that process a bit. Am I right, or am I wrong on that?
Jim?
I guess I'm confused. We talked about strategic plan, or you jumped to the budget?
Well, the strategic plan at the very bottom says, strategic plan looking closely at the need for a bond next few years, which is how I sort of.
Again, I would recommend that we pick 5 topics and then get into wordsmithing of the 4 or 5 topics. Because once you get to 4 or 5, then you can move a piece out of one heading and say that I feel very strongly about that. Let's put that specifically under strategic plan or not.
So you'd be happy with the language on page 2, where under bond, develop a plan for the advancement?
No, because we haven't discussed the next one yet.
You're
And
not
I do
there
have
yet.
some specific recommendations on the next one.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So to go into that, let's see if we can agree upon the buckets and then go from there. So there needs to be at least one goal on the strategic plan, right? Yes?
Yes.
Correct? 1. There needs to be at least one on the budget. Yes? There needs to be at least one on I think post-secondary still needs to be one of those, but I would leave it all to you all to decide that. And then the other one was, where'd it go? I lost my, nope. Preschool. So that's 4. Jim?
My 4, I sent you and Kimberly an email this afternoon. My 4 or 5 would be the strategic plan.
Yep.
I particularly like the one about math skill development.
Agreed.
Raising that to a level of a board goal seems to make things happen, maybe quicker. College and career readiness, I like, and then communications, we can improve one. I don't have one, I guess I also have one on the budget, but I like to hold off on that because it's a little different take than what is on what we have here. So,
Yeah, I think those are 5 fantastic buckets. Anybody have a different bucket or topic? So the 5 Jim proposed are strategic plan, budget, math skills development, college and career, readiness, is that what you called it? And
that's
then
what somebody else called it, yeah.
and then budget.
No, the last one was not budget.
Oh, sorry.
Communications.
What was your last one?
Communications
Communications.
of some sort, but again, that's just my list.
Kimberly?
The last 3 or 4 years, the board has had a goal around developing the preschool. So, is that a direction we consider that a change in direction? I just want to be able to give the administration.
Thanks, Dick.
I would add that to my list.
I definitely think we need to have a preschool goal. I think one of the things that we clearly see throughout the country and in New Hampshire and in our local school district is the need for parents to have a place where their children can get educated before kindergarten. And I think there's a huge need for that. And I think we need to take a serious look at that and how we can support the communities in making that happen. Particularly if we want to increase the enrollment of the workforce in our area, we need to make sure that we have some resources to help support the local industries in getting kids into school as soon as possible. We also know the sooner we address educational needs, it's like the Fram ad, pay me now or pay me later. And paying now is much cheaper than paying later. So definitely have a preschool goal.
Thank you, Dick. So that would be 6, strategic planning, budget, math skill development, college and career readiness, communications, and preschool.
Mr. Chair,
Dick.
I think 6 goals is a lot. I think you really, 2 to 3 goals is usually a very attainable kind of approach. I just think maybe some of those could be bind into a fewer goals, but if there was anything, if there was just a single preschool goal, I would be quite happy with that. But that also could be worked into a strategic plan.
Dr. Ullman.
I think a combination of the budget and communication would be possible. I'm a little worried about promising no larger than a 2% increase. God knows what the fiscal conditions are going to be. So I suggest we combine the communications and the budget. Talk about transparency about the budget and other ways of improving communication.
No, I suggested it as one, as a heading, because a number of things that was said in different places could be brought under the communications.
Correct.
I think we've done, people agree we've done a good job in the communications plan. We can continue to do better, but one more comment. In my mind, the purpose of goals is either to redirect what we're already doing or reemphasize, right? So with that in mind, I think 6 goals is not too much. We're gonna do math skills. We're gonna do preschool. This is reemphasizing those. It's not adding, I don't think it's adding anything to the administration's workload by having those as goals. It's just elevating them publicly too. Is that correct or no?
Depends how many school board requests are you going to send me next week?
I'm not gonna send you any. I like to send emails.
Rich.
Another way we could look at it is some of these things might fall under the annual goals of various committees. So, for example, there's one on here about the board will support CVHS's efforts to improve the school counselors and so forth. I think that's actually already encompassed within an equity committee goal.
Right.
So it wouldn't be like we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't make it a board goal. It would just be. And I actually kind of wonder, while I've been a huge supporter of the preschool and still am, if at some point, that's not baked in the cake. We've decided we're doing it. We budgeted for it. At what point will we check that off as the board having done its part?
Next year.
Okay.
Next year.
Based on the timeline, remember, it would have been, wasn't it gonna be this last?
So this
This was
this
this
fall
year.
should have been
2.0.
based on the initial timeline. Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong. Would have been the rollout of preschool for all. We kind of did a staggered rollout of that. So we expand again this year, and next year, hopefully, will be the full rollout. But that's the big step. So
Let's kind of follow up just
Yeah,
really
sure.
quickly. So I guess the other way of asking that is, what else is there actually for the school board to do on that except include it in the budget in the fall?
include it in the budget, and then
No,
you know,
I think that's it. So from that
definitely
perspective,
communications about why, et cetera.
whether or not the goal needs to be stated to be a value position, I don't know if that's what, the goals to me are again, not just things that go somewhere else, but it is a public statement by the board that these are the things we are still committed to.
Right.
Now, that may express itself in a budget, but Carrie, and then,
I
think one of the things that's really important about preschool is, one of the messages that we want to work on this year is,
Can you come to that, Mike?
sure.
Sorry, I just did the same thing. Can you just step to that
One
one?
of the
Thank you.
messages that is one of our goals to work on this year is to get the entire school community to embrace our district as a pre through 12 district. There's continued reference to K through 12, and I think that might be part of a meat of the goal that the board might want to invest in, so that everybody sees us as a preschool through 12 school district.
Thank you. Kimberly?
So that might be something that you could combine, would be the post-secondary with the preschool. A little bit in line with what Carrie's talking about, is saying, we're going to start having the conversation about pre-K through 14, not 14 grades, but, having students accumulate a certain number of post-secondary credits or post-secondary career certifications while they're still in high school.
Kevin?
I had the same reaction to the college and career readiness goal that Rich apparently did to the preschool goal, which is to say, isn't this part of what we do? Just, it is who we are. So why does it rise to the level of some special designation as a goal?
So, getting to where I think we've all wanted to be on that goal, or at least based on everything that I read prior to coming in and now being here, there are actions that the board, as a full board, may likely need to take on that and make some waves. Which community college might be the right provider for us to partner with, or what post-secondary, if we go down the road of that, there are some challenges in the structure of the New Hampshire community college system that might require the board to be throwing its weight behind that issue rather than just the administration, or expecting Heather to take on the chancellors. Does that, so to me, that's why that's something that stays there. And I think the fact that it's career readiness too, I think also does send the message to the people of Conval that we are not just focused purely on the pipeline to college, that there are career pathways that are appropriate and approachable, and that from my own other 9-to-5 job can tell you that all of that should still be tied with post-secondary learning, never stop learning, regardless of your pathway after CVHS. But nonetheless, I think it sends that message too, that it's not just college readiness, it is very specifically career and college readiness, that it's both of those, I guess, is my take on that. I don't know did I cover that appropriately? It's covering fire and willingness to take those shots when needed. Dr. Ullman.
Can I clarify the process? Are we now trying to define 4 to 6 buckets and then
Wordsmith.
maybe not tonight,
Correct.
but have a group of people, maybe on the strategic plan committee, sketch out what the,
Provide some draft,
okay.
and so that we can come back next week and say,
Okay,
that.
so do we write down the 4 or 5?
so that's what so my intent is to come up with those, to have agreement upon what those buckets are. And so there was some discussion about whether, so the strategic plan one, there should definitely be something about the strategic plan. How much of the stuff relative to what the content of that is, right? We can put a few together based on the ones that have already been submitted, and I will group those for you under that bucket. The next one was budget, and so you'll see them reorganized with a couple of options under, this should be our budgetary goal should be X, Y, or Z, so that you all then have some time to view them through that lens with the expectation that at the meeting on the 17th, the right date, we are yaying or naying however many of those goals there are. Does that help? Go ahead.
right now, if you look
Yep.
at the boldface, we have 9 buckets.
I understand.
And I would say that we have a preschool bucket, we have a strategic plan bucket, we have a math skills bucket, and maybe a communications dash budget bucket.
I think those are two separate buckets.
Okay, well, that would be 5 buckets, but I think we need to arrive at buckets.
Jim, no, I think we're close to agreeing to what those are. I think it's 6. I think the college and career readiness one needs to stay because that's going to take effort. Sorry, Jerry, and then Jim.
Yeah, just real quick. I understand that you're moving the reorganization into the strategic plan, but I think we need to include this as one of our board goals.
And I think Dr. Kriebel's suggestion, which I like, was I think we can have a strategic plan goal that says we'll adopt a strategic plan by such and such a date, and that said strategic plan shall address, a pathway forward on reorganization and consolidation. I think that was a perfectly reasonable. That puts 2 in 1. It puts it as a board goal, and will then force it to be in the plan as well, which gets to your concern that it doesn't just get punted again.
So in other words, there would be timeframes within that plan.
Ideally, all of these should have, well, to get to your point on the strategic plan, yes, in theory, that should have deliverables upon that 5-year timeline to move us down that path.
Okay.
That's exactly correct. Liz?
Sorry, I just want to clarify, when we're talking about the reorganization or consolidation of schools, and we're talking about that under the strategic plan, what is the public's role in how that plays out? Do they have a say?
Yep.
In,
So we have, so unlike the last strategic plan, the current strategic plan has community members involved on every subcommittee that we have. That will be part of it. The plan, as it's developed, will be presented to the community and have opportunities for the community to give us feedback on those parts. Rich?
I don't know if you saw Ann's eyebrows rise and Kimberly's scowl and my laugh, but there were a couple of dozen community members involved in the last strategic
Oh,
plan.
there were?
I think
Oh, sorry.
it's important that we not lose sight of that, in part because we don't want to disrespect the contributions they made.
They were not listed in any version of the report that's published. Their names are not included. There's about 12 people listed. 10 of them are district employees.
There were also, for example, 7 focus groups, a survey firm.
Okay.
There's
All right.
lots of things that went into the final document.
Thank you for clarifying that. That was definitely not reflected in any of the documents I've reviewed related to that. Thank you, Rich.
But by
Apologies if you were one of the community members I have now dismissed outright. So, Kevin.
But by embedding a commitment to a path in the strategic plan, the role of the strategic plan in committees, therefore, would be to contribute to defining a process for making that decision. And that is the cross I want to die on. Okay, there needs to be a process.
Agreed. Dr. Ullman.
Liz, just in the final analysis, it will require a 2/3 vote of district voters to do any consolidation. The voice of the public, especially in the towns that fear consolidation, will be very, very loud. It's not as if the public is going to be shut out.
Thank you, Dr. Ullman. Sorry, you're pointing, but, oh, sorry, Jim, your hand blended in.
If I could make a couple comments of my thoughts on the budgetary, I
Go ahead.
would not call it the budget bucket, I'd call it financial.
Financial, that's fine.
And-
We can do that.
And I fessed up to Kimberly and Tim in an email today. I intentionally didn't send anything in because I wanted to see what everybody else said. My thoughts are that a financial goal that is all motherhood isn't worth anything. I also think that the third bullet here that addresses a specific target for the budget is not appropriate as a goal. I think that belongs as part of the budget guidance document, which is the primary next steps of the Budget and Property Committee, to define that very specifically, much more so than you could in a goal. So with that in mind, one goal I would like to propose And if you're going to leave us off to subcommittees to do that, let me just read what I would propose here, because I thought it was captured a lot of other things that you guys are talking about. Here's what I would word it. I would have adopt district policies and implement processes that facilitate the development and communication of a facility and technology improvement plan that supports both the short-term and long-term needs of the district, and that includes a comprehensive funding plan, including possible bonds for these improvements. I think that captures a number of different things. A lot of stuff we're already doing, it's just elevating it.
Take two.
That's for just out there now, and we'll talk about it, and you might see it 2 weeks, you might not.
Thanks. Kevin?
I think Catherine was next.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Catherine. Go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, as we were talking about the students and student achievement and the math goal was specifically discussed, I would just like the board to consider, as we're working through this process of setting goals, maybe a broader goal, because we did have a year of learning loss, and we do have students who excel in math. Maybe we know we have to focus on that, but a goal that addresses learning loss and the two district goals for math and reading that they have set forth. Because I do think that this is a really important, pivotal time the next couple of years as we come out of this remote period and we're hopefully back in our classrooms and we're getting a lot of additional funding for these things. So tracking that might be of specific interest to us at this time.
Okay, great. Kevin?
We're sort of bouncing around here, but so I'll continue the bounce.
This is
Okay.
wonderful. This is chaos is a beautiful thing.
Okay. I listened to what Jim said, and as usual, it was eloquent, but I didn't hear any restraint in there. And I would like whatever finance goal we have to have some flavor of restraint, as in we're limiting ourselves.
The budget guidance is where you do that.
As opposed to a
The
goal.
only constraint,
Yeah.
the only constraint you can really do is the next year's budget, right? It's meaningless to talk about the next 3 or 5 years' budgets. The next year is the only thing we can impact. And the way, and
your budget process as being restrained, constrained. In other words, recognizing that you don't want the bottom line to grow more.
that's the appropriate place to put that is in the budget guidance that we give Kimberly. Okay, I think. And the Budget Property Committee will talk about it, the board will vote on it. If we decide we want to take the budget flat or up to or down to or whatever, that's the place to do that, not as a goal. Absolutely needs to be done, but not as a goal.
I took Jim's purpose to mean to actually put on the goal to have that inventory, to have that plan for what that was based simply on what is, right? Rather than say, put something on that says, but you have to look at it through this lens.
Well, the hot words I heard in Jim's goal were technology, buildings, and bond.
Right.
What we need to do and how we're gonna pay for it. That's another way of saying that.
All right.
Remember, that was a goal. The budget guidance is gonna happen, a separate thing. It will happen. Okay. I know where you're coming from.
So I'm going to try to do buckets, and if the buckets hold based on this suggestion or not, we'll get those down, and then I can get you all of those proposals that fall under those buckets so that we can agree on them at the next meeting. So a strategic plan bucket, a finance budget, finance bucket. I'm not allowed to say, right? So, right? I'm going to try to get the two of these, what are we calling it? Not learning recovery? Or student achievement? Student achievement, so let's call it a student achievement bucket, and then we can fit those two under that. A college and career readiness bucket, a communications bucket, and a preschool bucket. That would be the 6. Jim?
Didn't Carrie suggest pre-K through college?
Oh,
or
sorry.
something?
Thank you. That we
Okay.
would use that to rebrand that whole approach. I'm okay with that. So that would be 5. So strategic plan, finance, student achievement, pre-K through K through gray, pre-K through gray, as my old assistant secretary used to say. Yeah, Dr. Ullman, that you're the other part of that. And then communications. So
What's in the communications bucket?
I had presumed that would be the next wave of all the other communication stuff we've done that move us from reactive to proactive communication with our constituents. So implementing the forums would fall under that goal. Implementing new strategies for proactive outreach. The draft statement you'll get. All right, because if you read the various communication goals that Rich and I think Janine provided us the history of some of those, that's now where we're at on that. So we should, I think, have that goal there so that we can realize the evolution of that process. How'd we, Alan?
I'm just a little confused, so bear with me for a second. Going back to the consolidation,
Sure.
and I'm sorry to go backwards, just trying to make sure I'm clear, is that the consolidation goal, if we want to call it that, would be under the strategic planning bucket of the school board's goals.
Correct. Meaning it would be specifically mentioned in the goal related to the strategic plan. So that it's
Unclear.
not just adopt the strategic plan by June 30, 2022. That would have further statements in there that would direct the strategic planning process.
I'm clear, thank you.
That's how I understood the suggestion, and I think that's a great way to make sure that everyone's concerns on that are in there. All right? Fantastic. How'd we do? All right. So regarding the administration goals, I want to go back to that because I do want to make sure we get those approved if possible. Were there any? Kimberly asked, but there weren't any hands that went up, and I maybe moved too fast on that. Are there any objections to the administrative goals that were put forward by the administration, Catherine?
I wouldn't use the word objection, it was more of a question and discussion. If
Sure.
that's okay?
Great. That's fine too.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So my question is surrounding the goal of 2022 to increase enrollment of newly committed K-12 students by 10%, working in conjunction with JPR to promote high-quality programs available pre-K to 12, which is in the goal, that's great. Publicizing career opportunities, increasing communities' understanding of the strength and value of the Conval School District. I'm specifically interested in that goal to understand what was it, title in there, director, what was the name of that? Development director would do, and then we got some basic cost information on that. So I was looking at like the cost benefit analysis that it seemed to me that we might be putting out as much as we would be getting back. So I was just looking for some more information on that goal.
So,
Got it. Thanks. That's it.
Okay. So similar to the development office similar to the development office at a college or some private institutions, they would be responsible for promoting the ultimately promoting the school, but also looking for outside grants as well as doing financial campaigns for donations. So functioning a little bit like a clearinghouse so that's the office, because I can't do this. That's the office that, works with alumni who've done really well and says, hey, can you write us into your will? Can you, pieces like that, can you pay for the Performing Arts Center? So functioning more on a not completely dependent on all of our dollars and all of our projects on the local taxpayers, but really starting to think, okay, what do we have to do? What do we want to do? And what would be really nice to do? So, and I'm going to go back to the Performing Arts Center. It would be wonderful for us to have a Performing Arts Center. That would be lovely. Or a some sort of art gallery. So we have on our shelf a plan for an art gallery, and the development office would work directly to say, hey, we've got this project. Can you consider, Dr. Einstein donating, the dollars and naming this. So if you look at private institutions, this office is a typical office that they have. And I guess I would point to the recent changes in the New Hampshire landscape for schooling. And I would say welcome to the competitive educational marketplace.
Yes, well, that came to mind, development office and private school, kind of, that's where I went to. So currently in our structure, who would be working in this office? Is it budgeted for? And with the resources that we currently have, how are we?
So no. And that's why we would need to kind of consider creating it. So, what would this office do? How would we man this office? How much would it cost to run? Could it be completely run on indirect costs associated to grant funding that, that they are pursuing? So that's the consideration. All of those are the considerations, and then bringing those considerations forward and saying, okay, this is how we envision what a development office would do. Here's how many people it would take to run. Here is the ultimate cost. Here would be, what we would be looking for that development office to bring into the district over the first 5 years. Does that make sense? Okay.
Go ahead.
So it's an ambitious goal, and I do understand there's a change in landscape. My only concern is that we are welcoming children back to school with a very unknown fall and unknown skill sets, unknown mental health issues, unknown behavior. We've hired additional staff through federal dollars and through the budget. And is this the right time to be recruiting people from other districts this year and further stretch the resources that we do have, trying to develop something new when we really have to focus on the kids that we have right here, right now, who really, really need us to be a stable, consistent environment while increasing educational outcomes?
Rich?
Can I address something really quickly and then beg everyone's indulgence for 3 minutes of history that I think would be really helpful. So the first thing is we're making this the superintendent's goal for this year. It wouldn't be until next year that you'd see additional students in. So your point about kids returning this fall and needing a stable environment, I think that's dealt with just by the calendar of laying this out. The 3 minutes of history on out of district tuition students. This actually arose not out of it arose out of some of our previous consolidation discussions, and specifically, it was about at the time the number of what should have been Conval students who were homeschooled, which was actually quite high back when we had data that we no longer have to indicate how many of them there are, and this was seen by the board at the time as a challenge, but it was seen by a couple of board members and a couple of selectmen, frankly, as a good thing. And we kept getting feedback like, why wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if a student left? We're paying $18,000 a student. The student leaves, and that's $18,000 we don't need to pay anymore. And I think the rest of us said, well, wait a minute, just because a student leaves doesn't mean our costs actually drop by $18,000. What does it actually drop by? And so we tasked the then business administrator with coming up with that number. When a student leaves the district, how much does that actually save us in direct costs? And then the flip side of that is, if someone moves into the district and brings their kid, it doesn't add $18,000 to the cost of the district. It adds some number, which should look very much like the number of when someone leaves, right? The number that Marion came up with, or that the business administrator at the time came up with, was about $1,200. That is the incremental cost of adding or subtracting an additional student. And so that was helpful for us to say, no, when a kid starts homeschooling, it doesn't save us $18,000, it saves us $1,200. And by the way, we lose $3,600 in state revenue. But it was also caused us to say, well, okay, if we can add a student, if we can sell slack capacity for more than our direct cost of $1,200, why wouldn't we do that? That this has traditionally been the premier school district in the region, and that while we might not have people breaking down our doors to pay the full per pupil cost that covers all of our overhead, that they might be willing to pay some dollar figure that was lower. And there's a lot of ground between $18,000 and $1,200. How we arrived at the number at the time, which I think was $6,800, is there's a provision in the contract that teachers who want to, from out of district who want to bring their kids here, pay 1/3 of the per pupil cost as calculated by the state on the basis of the MS-25s. And so the number we picked wasn't arbitrary. I believe it was $300 more than teachers at the time would have paid. And that was so that we did not, by bringing kids in from outside of this lower tuition, did not cause teachers to say, well, that tuition's lower than what I'm paying. I won't take my teacher discount. I'll pay this lower price. And then we'll cost taxpayers actual money, right? And so we tried to avoid that. So that's where we came up with the $6,800. And it's gone up a little bit each year since. I was about prepared to admit that it just didn't work, that we never saw the number of people that we hoped to. But I think the situation on the ground has changed in such a way that I think this is actually a brilliant goal, and I want to say why. So one is that a big part of the reason that we never got any traction on getting people is we were always squeamish about promoting it. Because it could be seen as poaching students from our neighbors, and those neighboring districts we have important relationships with. What has changed now that makes that no longer the same concern to me is the educational freedom accounts. Because now we're talking about students that those neighboring districts are going to lose anyway, and we're saying, we want them rather than somewhere else. It's a little bit of a different dynamic than to be directly poaching them, right? So I think that if we actually promoted it, we might find more interest. The second thing I would say is that I've had a number of people from the larger region say to me directly in these words, I am so jealous of what Conval was able to do during the pandemic, that I think there is interest and goodwill in the broader region for Conval. And the third point is that my opinion of these educational freedom accounts, whatever we think of whether they should exist, it's exactly the sort of government program that never goes away. Because once people start receiving that benefit, they will fight like dogs to keep it. So it's going to be here. And if anything, I expect that they're going to push again for their original number, which was the same amount that you give to charter school students, not the lower number, and that they're going to push to remove or at least modify the 300% of poverty level limitation on this. And so I think there's actually a tremendous upside if some things happened. If that number becomes $7,800 and 90% of people in our surrounding school districts are eligible, there's a tremendous potential upside that never existed before. And the financial cost strikes me as, for that portion of this goal, strikes me as low. Strikes me as being covered by 1 or 2 additional students. And the upside is pretty high. And the on the cost and whether it would cost us more to get someone in than we received in revenue for them, We shouldn't look at it as spending $35,000 or $20,000 or whatever to get an additional student for a year. It's the cost of establishing a new account. And chances are, once you get a student in for 1 year, you've got them for more than 1 year. And if, say it was 2 students and it's $7,500 apiece and it's $15,000, if any of you would care to sell me an annuity paying $15,000 a year for 13 years for $35,000, I'll take that deal all day, right? So I think we would need to do a little bit, a slightly deeper analysis than we're going to spend the same amount that we're going to bring in year one, because it's not about year one. It's about establishing that new customer relationship. So I'm actually very excited about this goal, and I was glad to see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Kevin?
It's embarrassing to follow that with a tiny technical question. But my tiny technical question was, I was on the communications committee when we contracted with Guilfoyle, and I don't remember when the review of that contract and the renewal of that contract comes up. And so I was curious, because this is somewhat built on a partnership continuing with them, right?
I believe that that's in October, that contract's, the contract starts, is that correct? I believe the contract started October 1, and goes to until October 1.
And how will that year with Guilfoyle be evaluated? What's the basis for evaluating that?
I guess that will be up to the board. I've worked really closely with Guilfoyle, obviously. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure Jordan and John would be happy to come in and answer any questions. I would say one of the things that the board was definitely looking to do was to get more information out more quickly. So that should definitely be one way. The other thing that the board was looking to do was put up that news blog. That has obviously worked. The video series. So those would be some things certainly.
Yeah,
And it was also, the other piece was, would it be less expensive to have Guilfoyle than it would be to hire somebody? And that has clearly, I mean, we could not get a communications person for less than 6 digits, and
I didn't mean to have you evaluate it right now,
Oh,
Kimberly. I
sorry.
really didn't. It was well done, but I was actually looking over there to say, it seems like something the communications committee would certainly take on before the contract was renewed. Some evaluation process, right?
So September 1. It's September 1 to September 1.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Short time frame.
And so people should also know that I talked to JGPR as I was developing this goal. This wasn't something that I had to figure out what an inbound marketing plan was. Yeah, inbound marketing.
Dr. Ullman?
I hope what you got, I sent out 5.5 pages of comments about the administration.
We appreciate
It is
every word.
scintillating reading. I mean, forget about Stephen King. This is good stuff. And I don't mean, I do mean to throw rain on Kimberly's parade as far as the development office is concerned. If Conville High School were St. Paul's or Phillips Exeter or Phillips Andover or Groton, or schools that provided all Kevin's peers when he went to college, or if Conville High School were Boston Latin, or Bronx High School of Science, or New Trier High School, I would be more optimistic about a development office. So I wish you luck, and I love your optimism, but I'm kind of pessimistic.
You
Well,
absolutely can, because if you don't, I will.
Okay, so here's the thing. We, all right, so I'm going to say one thing, and please take this with a grain of salt. I'm going to be direct, and I hope that I can do that. For years and years and years as an educator, I have heard be more innovative, change things, be more innovative. And every time myself, I've seen, this is not, I'm not saying this is you guys, but in our district, in other districts across the country, every time a public school goes out on that limb and says, look, here's something totally different. Let's steal from different places and come up with something a little new for public school. People say, no, stop, make it look exactly like it was when I was in school. So Dr. Ullman, I hear what you're saying, but we have a product, and I'm not saying this because I'm the superintendent. I'm saying this because I'm a public educator in New Hampshire who has a son, and I know what's out there for educational opportunities. And we have a really good public education product that could be even a little better every year. But I think we have reached a point that we have to really examine the way we do business and take from people like St. Paul's, like Boston Latin, and say, okay, what are they doing differently? Not necessarily academically, because we have some programs that are as good as some of the programs at Boston Latin. What are they doing differently to attract children? And what can we take? What lessons can we learn and adopt that? Maybe a development office, maybe we put all those ideas on the table, and maybe that's not a good idea. And so we scrap it. But at least we looked at it and said, hey, here's something different. Here's something other places do. Can we do this here? Is it appropriate? Is it meaningful? Will it get the intended product and the intended outcome? And I think the second piece to say is you keep doing that. You keep like saying, oh, Kimberly, your life's work. We have to talk.
No one could be more celebratory but your work.
Thank you,
No
Mr.
one brags about you behind your back as much as I do. I offer the services of my daughter-in-law who's visiting for a week and a half, who's a big shot in development at the University of Toronto, where it raises $2.6 billion and stuff like that. Yeah, I could have her call you, but I wish you the best of luck, and I love your enthusiasm.
Thanks, Dr. Ullman.
Dick.
I personally think it's a great idea. And I want to share with you a comment I got yesterday from a student who was a previous student at SMS who was home, and we FaceTimed. And when I finished, she said, I just needed to tell you, I've been all over this country teaching, and I'm so grateful I went to Conval because it prepared me for whatever I was doing, from AmeriCorps to the West Coast teaching in Los Angeles, to be a good student. I think we need to change the way we look at education, and we need to say to the public out there that we have a quality that you won't necessarily get in a private school. And that's called interacting with fellow citizens that are not just like you. And part of the problem we have, it's too much of just like you, and we need to see that diversity, and we can reach out and bring that into our district. So you got my support. I think it's well worth taking the risk, and I think financially the rewards will be there, as Rich shared.
Rich.
So we will never raise funds like Exeter, but I want to suggest a different comparable. Pinkerton Academy in Derry, which is a public academy that, because of its different governance structure, because it is it's actually, I think, a 503c4 or something. It's its own non-public. It can and does raise private funds to the tune of about $400,000 a year. So it's not millions, but it's not something that we wouldn't care about either. And I think maybe we could think of that as our the comparable, or even adjusting that for the size of the two organizations. You might still be raising a couple $100,000.
I look forward to the second annual Conval Golf Tournament. All right, sorry, Catherine.
I just have one more comment then. I would ask that might the SAU consider adding homeschooled and students considering leaving the district to this goal so that we are making sure that we are retaining the students we currently have who might consider leaving. We actively work to retain or change their minds, and homeschooling, because these are Conval tax dollars we'd be using to initially support this endeavor.
I like the retention ad.
Yeah, so we do have developed a customer satisfaction, so I think it would be an easy kind of add. And I know that I've asked this a couple times. We could always do a homeschool survey again, just like maybe that would be a good idea. And I could add it to this.
Rich?
I keep talking, but I'm sorry. Just because we have new board members. One thing people might not realize is that when the state changed its homeschooling laws 7 years ago, tremendous amount of data that used to be required of homeschoolers that was provided to local school districts disappeared. And so we don't have anything like the same visibility that we used to have. And that's why we have to talk about things like surveys rather than actually knowing. And it's very hard. It's why I think we've done this 3 times. We've tried to capture that data some other way multiple times. So.
But I think that finding out why students aren't here is because it's a variety of reasons. So it's very worthwhile.
I would agree. Kevin?
Just an add-on to that is on the planning board master plan in the town that I'm from, I wrote the education section in that plan, and part of that involved me in finding out how many people in town were actually homeschooling, and my number was not at all what the school district was estimating. And I was told specifically, we're not going to tell Conval we're homeschooling. All we have to do is tell some private school principal who doesn't care, and that's generally the default, is to call some private principal in a private school principal who says, fine, sure, great, and go, that's it. So a survey, good idea.
Rich?
Sorry, last one. So
Are you sure? I'm going to get a gavel.
Last one on this.
Oh, okay.
The other thing is that there's been in the past, and not with the superintendent, but in the past, trepidation in interacting with homeschoolers and in the district working closely with homeschoolers. I don't think that's true anymore, but I don't know that everyone in the community and in the homeschooling community knows that that's not true. New Hampshire has an extremely permissive dual enrollment statute, and so the reality is parents can opt out of virtually anything because they can always say, I'm homeschooling for that and not for this. And it would be very much in our interest if instead of people homeschooling their kid and taking advantage of our services in various areas, they instead enrolled their kid, got us access to the state funding, and opted out of things they wanted to opt out of. And that's something that it seems like a communications effort might help with. Thank you.
To explain that that's even an option, I think is part of that discussion, because my expectation or the conversations have gone the other way, that they opt in instead of opt out. No, I understand. I understand. I have intimate family knowledge of that relationship. So any other of the administration goals that there's a issue or concern with? If not, I would be looking to the board to approve the administration goals.
Second,
Moved by Kevin, second by Dick. Additional discussion?
I appreciated the presentation. I thought it was one of the most concise, to the point, and we didn't go on and on and on. When the horse was dead, we got off it, and I appreciated that.
Can I just?
Yes, Kimberly.
So I just have a question. I know there were some questions about the 10% being changed to a specific number. Are people fine with the 10%? Do you want to see a change to the number? I just, the 10% was not like off the top of my head. We had 13, our base would have been 13. We actually had 5 students graduate, who were tuition bearing students. So bringing us down to 8. So what we're really looking to do is get the 10% wouldn't just be 1 or 2, it would actually be for replacing those 4 or 5 plus 1 or 2 more. Liba.
Rich?
Okay, new topic. Right.
Wait, all right, hold on, we didn't vote on those yet. Are
Um,
we still, this is the discussion on the, yep,
No,
okay, great.
On this goal.
Yeah, go ahead.
Kimberly will tell you, I've objected to expressing very small numbers and goals in terms of percent for a long time, because I think it actually obscures as much as it reveals. This is clearly a very small number. I would actually like to suggest as a general rule, because a percent is 1 out of 100, that when the population you're talking about is less than 100, you express it in numbers. And that when it's more than 100, like all students who are taking math, then you express it in percents. So I personally would love to see it as a number.
Is 100?
No, as a number,
Oh.
yeah. We'd like 100 new students. If you could go round those up, that would be fantastic. Thank you very
So if
much.
the
Good
number's
luck.
5
Good luck.
plus 2, I'd like
By
to see the number
Tuesday,
percent.
Tuesday.
I can change
So
it
can we
to
ch-
a number. Yes. Yep. I think it's 5.
Dr. Ullman.
I had my say in the, my,
Well, we're still in that part. So.
I really appreciate.
And several Oxford commas. Any other comments, questions, or feedback? So the one change would be to drop the percentage and put the number?
Sure.
Any other discussion or comments? With that, all in favor of approving the administration's goals, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The administrative goals are approved. All right. With that, I was hoping you would have printouts, but you don't, so we'll walk through it if you have your computer, or I'll have to talk you through it otherwise. Do you want to, for the self-evaluation? So one of the exercises that thankfully to Catherine's persistence on this, which I greatly appreciate, is the board completed, or 10 of you completed the board self-evaluation tool. So thank you for that. Catherine can walk us through some of that. It was interesting to see, so you had all 3. You had the ones where we tended to cluster at the met or exceed, the ones where we tended to cluster on the all agree that we didn't meet, and then the other ones were more fascinating where there was extreme wide divergence. So with that, I'll let Catherine walk us through some of those.
Thank you, Tim. So the process that we used was a basic standard self-assessment tool where we used meets, standard, exceed standard, or needed improvement. There were 5 standards that we looked at, and as you said, we had 10 participants to collect the scores. All I did was collect and aggregate the raw scores, and then I did chart them for easy viewing. And I think it's of note that when we looked at standard 1, providing responsible school board governance, that generally speaking, overall, the board felt that we met standards. There were a few outliers with more on the exceeding side than needs improvement. So with that said, I think I'd like to move on to standard 2, which was set and communicate high expectations for student learning with clear goals and objectives. When we look and parse that standard down, there were 4 questions, and in 3 out of the 4 questions, there was more of a consensus of the board that needing improvement was needed. For example, leading development, articulation, and stewardship of vision of learning that is shared and supported by the school community. Another one was adopting a collaboratively developed district plan focused on learning and achievement outcomes for all students. And the final one that a larger majority of board members felt that we needed improvement, and there was quite a bit of consensus around, was ensuring non-negotiable goals for student achievement are established and aligned to the district's plan. So that was, I think, of note as we're developing our goals for the next year, that we consider that. When we move into standard 3, which was create conditions for district-wide student and staff success, the overall consensus for this goal was that we met standards. The only place where we were divided, with 4 out of 5 responses, was adopt and monitor an annual budget that allocates resources based on the district's vision, goals, and priorities for student learning. That was an area that a larger percent of board members felt that we needed to improve. In standard number 4, holding the school district accountable for meeting learning expectations, an area that we felt that this was a majority, 6-4, evaluating the superintendent on clear and focused expectations was an area that we felt we needed improvement. However, that is being worked on. And in standard number 5, engage the local community and represent the values and expectations that they hold for our schools. Generally, the board felt that we met the standard for doing that. However, collaborating with families and community members, responding to diverse interests and needs, and mobilizing community resources was an area that a majority of the board felt needed improvement. So I would just encourage everyone, as we are parsing down our goals, the point of the exercise was to know what areas we should be maybe focusing on as a board. I would say the bigger takeaway, while I just focused a little bit on needing improvement, overall, we met standards when we're really looking at the data. That's how the majority of the board felt, and it's important to know that this wasn't a self-assessment to just only focus on the negative. I'm just focusing on the areas of improvement because we're currently developing our goals. Certainly, this tool or a tool like this, it's prescribed in our own policy that we use. I would certainly welcome feedback on this tool to see if we should use a different tool moving forward. However, I do believe that these types of self-assessments and how we're feeling are important. And I would also encourage the board to look at the raw scores, because there are some outliers where maybe several people felt like we needed some improvement, or perhaps several people really felt like we excelled. So perspective is also extremely important, that we all have our own perspective on whether it's our longevity on the board, personal lived experience, our own professional expertise, that we all bring our own unique views to the board. So thank you all for participating in that super fun exercise.
Thank you, Catherine. I do want to make sure that for those of you watching at home, and for those of you that are here, Mr. Brown, good to see you again, that this was the board evaluation of the board. So nothing in this is intended to be reflective on the actions of the district or the administration, but quite literally the board. So in the section on the board needs to work better on communicating with families, the community, and stuff like that, that is a direct assessment of the board's role in that versus the district or the administration. And you'll notice that as you peruse our website, where the last update from the board from a communication perspective was to welcome Dr. Kriebel, versus the district communication, which is quite regularly freely flowing from the district perspective. So that is definitely one thing that I do agree on that one. And I think we are significantly better than where we were, even in my short time living in this district. I think all of the work that was done by Jim and the others relative to the now 3 year ago, I've lost count. I've been here that long now, for the budgetary stuff and that whole communication suite for those 2 years running, I think really represented a good shift in the board trying to put more out from the perspective of the board. And I know that Alan and prior to that, Nikki, were working really good on trying to get the board to communicate as well as the board, and not just rely on the district to push that stuff out. I know that relationship often appears to be one and the same, but we are not always one and the same. So, all right, Jim.
I had a question, and I sent this in my email to Catherine. Is what do we do with this next? Are we going to operate? Are we going to talk about what's next on this thing, or?
So what's next is, in theory, this tool should inform the development and adoption of our goals. So if, for example, on this self-evaluation, it's clear that we think we need more work on communication, which that's what, for example, that's the easiest one to pick off. Arguably, that should be considered in the goal-making process. Is that a fair? How'd I do? So that's the purpose of this, and that's why this should be done ahead of the goal-setting process. This year, we wanted to try to force ourselves to try to start doing the things we're supposed to do. So they happen to be more at the same time, but I think by now having this, so you can all see where we believe we're at, that might help inform the quality of the narrative statements of our goals for next year.
Right, so that's this year's goals. What I'm thinking about is, I thought it'd be useful personally to go through some of these indicators for the low scorers.
Sure.
And there's 4 or 5 questions that boil, and maybe set up a process where we go through some of the low scoring ones and as a group talk about them. How do we feel about this specific indicator? What do we think we can do to move the needle next year? And what kind of action plans can we take as a board? I think I think this is a great tool, as long as I don't want to use the word weaponize it.
We call it actionable, Jim, actionable.
Operationalize it.
Operational, that's right.
I had to throw that in. I figured Kimberly would like that one.
Yeah, of course, Catherine, go ahead.
So ideally, this process should probably have started a few months ago. And if you looked at the step 1 part of the process, it described what each indicator meant and everything in that indicator, so that when you do see outliers or you see a broad consensus in areas that you know, well, let's keep this up because we're doing really well at it, or on the opposite of needing some improvement, you parse that down. So I agree that additional conversation should be time willing, and the board should set some time aside for that exercise, but we're just trying to institutionalize a tool and a process and a timeline would be ideal.
Ideally, you want this a month before your goal setting, process, so that you've got the time to have those exact
Yeah, I'm
discussions.
suggesting we make this a process, not an event. And the discussion on why different people think about low score, high scores is probably more valuable than having
the actual-
the scores themselves.
So I mean, we can definitely add, if you want, I can add those to the agenda for the 17th. We can have some time on the 17th to talk through those particular ones.
I would
where,
suggest, rather than do it all at once, maybe come up with some kind of way to do it throughout the year.
Oh, sure, we can do that too. That's fine. Sure, we'll add one to every agenda for the next couple of meetings. Is that?
Something like that. I mean, what do you guys think?
I think that's fine.
Those are just my thoughts. That's,
No objection here. Anyone? Dr. Ullman?
A workshop would be a possibility, sitting down for 4 hours.
You just killed that one.
At the Ullman residence?
I'd let you come to my house. There'll be an entry fee.
Tim, I think your suggestion's a good one. I think you should I think you
Kevin.
should select
A group?
some of these that are definitely pregnant to ask questions, right? Like
Right.
if I'm looking at A under standard 5, where there were 6 who believed needed improvement, 3 who met standards, and 1 who thought we exceeded it. We ought to mine into that. And
Agreed.
find out
That was
really
the one I was-
what's
that
going.
was the
Drill
one I
down
was
into
thinking
that and
of.
find out what's really going on there.
Agreed.
And
Yep. No, I think we can add one to the agenda for the foreseeable future, and I think that's a fine way to get that ball rolling and to make this an operational thing that we do. And again, next year, ideally do it, for those of us that'll still be here, God willing. I thought it was, having filled out numerous surveys and evaluation tools, I thought it was direct enough. I liked only having the 3 choices, because the minute, in my mind, you go to 5 or a rate of 10, make a decision, pick a bucket, and accept your answer, and then defend it. Rich.
So we're going to organize that by the indicators, right? And I wonder if I can take a minute now to respond to one of the evidence points. And specifically just because I think it speaks to collegiality of the board and function of the board.
Sure.
So I appreciated what you said, that you set this up for everyone, this is the board's self-evaluation of what the board has done in the last 12 months. It's not an evaluation of the district or anyone else. One of these evidence points I think is like really important to the way the board functions. And that's one that's in here. That's, no one board member should have more information or access to more information as part of the decision-making process than other board members, which I completely agree with. And it was my real hobby horse my first 3 or 4 years on the board, right? But there's a caveat, which is the next one, which is outside of length of service on the board and historical knowledge. And I just want to say again, I completely agree everyone should have access to the same information, but that's not a little caveat. That's a huge caveat. I track my hours. I spend somewhere between 700 and 800 hours a year on school board business. And over 8.5 years, that's like 3 years at a full-time job. And I've been on every subcommittee, and I've been in all kinds of task force and working groups, right? And you just accumulate a lot of information that's not easily available to everyone. Even when you look at the Google Drive with thousands of pages of documents, it's not like I'm new and have to go read thousands of pages now. I've read them as they were produced over the last 5 years, right? So it's a really big caveat, and I actually think that Kimberly tries very hard to make sure we all have the same information. But I do want to say, in the hopes that it will help us work together as a board, that there's an exception to everything I just said. And that exception is the last year. We're evaluating the board over the last 12 months, most of which time I was the board chair for, and all of which time there were things going on in the district and the world, right? And I think I can say without exaggeration, I sent more emails to the board during that year than I had received from all the board chairs in the 7 years prior to that. But it still wasn't enough, and I will accept the criticism for myself that I was unable to communicate as much of the information fire hose that was going on each day as would have been nice. I just want to be really clear that I'm accepting that as a criticism of myself and not as a criticism of any efforts on the part of district employees who I actually think tried very, very hard to make sure we all had the same information. So I just wanted to say that I completely support everyone having access to the same information. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Any other comments on this particular topic? Thank you all again. It makes an organization better every time they take an honest look at where they are and where they want to go and what they need to work on. All right. Public comment. So we have reached the second public comment period of tonight's school board meeting. Oh, no, I have to go to the public first, Dr. Almanet.
I want to suggest that we spend a quarter of an hour with Mr. Brown.
I mean, just roll up a chair. I'll give you the next 10 minutes. That's fine, since you're, do you have any comments or questions you'd like to? We technically don't take questions, but step right up. You're here. Roll up to the mic so the other members of the public can.
Dollars from the state, right? We were talking about that earlier. Does the preschool that we're talking about starting, is the number the same per student when we're talking preschool?
Presently, we receive $0 for preschool students from the state of New Hampshire unless those students simultaneously meet the requirements of IDEA, which is the special ed law. And in those cases, those dollars are actually federal, and it's a pass through from the Fed to the school district through the state.
Funding, my mindset was, let's bring in preschool, solve some of the student population, and bring in some extra dollars. That was
So the federal legislation may, at some point, resolve some of that, although the state doesn't right now. And we do charge, isn't there tuition?
There's a nominal tuition fee for preschool.
Right, no, it doesn't come close to covering our costs, but there is a nominal tuition fee that's also paid. Some of that is about access. I mean, I don't know if there aren't enough providers even in our district to meet demand really for quality preschools. So it's also meeting that need as well. From that perspective, and I'll simply say the other comment about I don't get the Fram reference. I think that may predate me. As it does, but I don't mean that. I consider myself an old soul, but maybe I missed that one. But there is without question an advantage to spending that money at that point in a child's development than not addressing that stuff until later. I know that when we did the original presentation back on that, there was a dollar figure we had attached to what the dollar spent then is a fairly significant savings versus what you'd have to pay later. But I don't remember what that is off the top of my head.
I can share that. There's like a one pager I can share that is actually based. The study was actually based in New Hampshire, so I can share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Approval of manifests.
Okay, I certify that manifests totaling $1,397,874.37 have been reviewed by me and found to be proper charges against Kentucket Valley School District for goods and or services received and have been properly processed prior to their submittal to the school board.
I move we approve the manifest as presented.
Second.
Moved by Dick, second by Jim. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The manifests are approved. We do have a couple of more non-publics, two more. I guess they both fall, well, one's negotiation. I would put yours under legal, I guess, or no. Yeah, yours. I don't know which actions which may. Yeah, I'll have to look up the subparagraph for that. Is that negotiations? That's negotiation. So they're both negotiations,
I move,
right? What? Oh yeah. So let's take so we'll do a 2-minute break after we go in. So if I get a motion to go into the non-public for negotiation.
sure, I move that we move into non-public session under RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2 for
Sorry, did you have a question?
negotiations.
I'll take the motion, but. Yep. Me. Yes. I'm gonna take everything you all submitted and do all of that. And you'll get that tomorrow, probably. Tomorrow afternoon, because my morning's booked.
I second Catherine Heck's motion.
Thank you, Dick. All in favor to go into non-public?
Aye.
We're now enter into non-public. Thank you very much. So a motion to seal the minutes from the non-public session, please.
I move we seal the minutes for 5 years from non-public.
Second?
Moved by Dick, second by Catherine. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Now I will
Motion to
entertain it.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Greg,
Second?
second by Catherine. All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night. Thank you very much.